So, you're a business owner dedicated to the significant and sustainable growth of both you and your business. Welcome to the ADDAZERO podcast.
Hi, I'm Jay Allen from the ADDAZERO podcast and delighted to have you with us today as I talk about when to quit. Now, you might wonder as to why it is, as a business scale and exit mentor, that I'm spending any time at all talking about quitting. And yet today's episode is all around being able to help people to be able to move from where they are to where they need to be in order to be able to add a zero. And one of the things about that is to be able to ensure that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons with the right people in order to be able to get the right amount of traction. So let's dive in and talk about when it's times to quit. I was recently with a client and had to deliver some rather challenging news. We'd been working together for 3 or 4 months. They were enthusiastic. They were doing everything that I've been asking or inviting or sharing with them with regards to the ADDAZERO methodology. We'd already done the ADDAZERO audit and we'd looked at the strengths and weaknesses within their business. And then we were working on patching up some of the challenges and or threats that were in their existing business model in order to be able to make it move forward. And we were about the 3-month point when we ended up having this conversation. What I identified was that whilst everything that they were doing was working, they were working hard, they were putting in the effort, they were doing everything that I'd suggested to them, we were making progress. But the gap between where they were and where they wanted to be and the time frame that they wanted to achieve that within quickly became a realization that that was unrealistic. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to be a dream stealer and take anything away from people. I'm here to be able to help and support and guide people to be able to make a significant and sustainable growth of their business. But it's also important to be able to look at the reality and say, how big's the market and how many people within that market do we need to have an impression upon in order to be able to scale sufficiently so we can achieve the outcome? And that there are some businesses and some business owners, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to take anything away from people's passion project or a side hustle, but if we're going to fully commit to being able to turn this into a scalable business, then we need to look at the size of the industry to determine as to how much of the industry do we need to have ownership of that we are servicing for it to impact us and what we're trying to achieve in the manner that we're trying to achieve it. And what we'd identified is, although this person had a real strong passion for what they were doing, that in actual fact, the niche was so specific, so tiny, that you would almost need to have complete market supremacy and almost be the industry leader today in order to be able to have the impact they needed for the reward that they were looking for. It's important to recognise that some things that we do are simply passion projects, that are things about giving back and about being able to offer to a wider community, to be able to change the way we do things. It's okay to have something that allows us to be able to do so. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for people having a lifestyle business, something that's able to be able to provide them with a salary whilst they have a feel-good factor about the things that they're doing. That's okay. I'm more than happy with that, as was the client at the end of the conversation. But too many people will look to social media or things online and these professors of, we can get you to 10K months, we can get you to 50K months, join our program and we'll do 100K in the next 30 days. All of these measures, these external measures that people are then validating their business and their growth against become unrealistic unless we look at context. So today I want to take a leaf from a book by Cooney called Feed a Starving Crowd, and understand that one of the first things that we ought to do when we're thinking about launching a new business, or certainly in the very development stage of a test and measure is to understand the size of the audience that we're looking to be able to operate within, how big's the industry, and how much of that industry do we need to impregnate? How big of a following do we need? What sort of an impression do we need to have within that industry for it to give us the reward that we're looking to be able to achieve, both in month one, quarter one, year one, and then progressively, how big an impression do we need to have going forward in order for it to be a continually growing and scaling business? So let's look a little bit more about you and your industry to understand that perhaps what you're currently doing isn't big enough or scalable enough to be able to warrant being able to spend any more than a few hours a week of passion project time in order to be able to fulfill. I had another client, I'm just going to park that for 1 second. I had another client about 7 or 8 years ago. I'd been speaking at a large event and talking about sustainable and significant scale, not just about a 5 or 10 or 15% growth, but how to be able to do 25, 30, 45% net profit growth year on year on year, which is what ADDAZERO has been really, really great at being able to deliver for people. And as I got off stage, there was a small group of people that gathered around afterwards to be able to ask some more personal questions that they didn't necessarily want to ask in front of a large audience. And this one lad came up to me and he gave me a bit of a dink on the shoulder and said, "Don't like you very much right now." I was like, "Why? What have I done?" I was hopeful that I'd delivered some real value. He says, "Yeah," "but you've made me realise that the business that I've been operating in for the last 5 or 6 years hasn't got the scalable capacity without having a significant amount more infrastructure investment that I didn't really want to make. I'd grown my business to a certain level, but I hadn't really anticipated the amount of investment required to get beyond that level and whether I was ready and committed to being able to do so. You've made me realise that I've actually hit a bottleneck, a glass ceiling to which I'm uncomfortable at being able to move forward with. And it's helped me realise that perhaps I need to change my industry or the way in which I do things in order to be able to have a better shot at being able to achieve those bigger numbers without that amount of investment. And it's so typical. When we do our ADDAZERO audits with businesses across the UK from every single sector, from every single size of business, every single time we do the audit, we see a typical business model. We'll see that they've grown in the traditional sense, they've got to a certain size and might, and then the thing that's holding them back is usually that level of investment required in order to be able to move to the next level. And sometimes there's the fear of doing so, or the lack of abilities to be able to regenerate cash into the business to be able to move them forward. But anything that's causing them a stickling block, a bottleneck, that's creating some form of mediocrity in its ability to be able to move forward is a massive risk to the business, because if you're not growing, you're automatically shrinking. Let me just quickly qualify that and then we can talk about how to overcome it. You see, at the moment in the UK, at the time of recording this, interest rates across the UK are somewhere between 4.5% and 5.25%. And if your business isn't growing at above 5.25% per year, then because interest rates are growing, you're actually shrinking by the amount of money you're charging compared to what you're delivering, compared to how much it costs you to be able to deliver it. We've got to be seeing 7, 8, 9, 10 as a bare minimum growth in the business in order to be able to continue to move the business forward. And the moment you create some form of stagnation, you're at risk of falling behind with other businesses that are already being able to achieve that sort of growth. And what this client had identified is, whilst they'd been growing at a steady, more typical traditional rate, that in actual fact the level of investment required to be able to move forward was far, far bigger than he'd anticipated, and wasn't really comfortable in being able to take on board that level of debt in order to be able to move the business forward. So sometimes it's important to be able to realise as to where is the bottleneck, where's the ceiling within your current business model, and what are you willing and prepared to do for you to grow, for your business to grow? Have we reached that bottleneck, that plateau to which we're struggling to be able to push past? Now, don't get me wrong, ADDAZERO is specifically designed to be able to help people to be able to significantly and sustainably move forward. But some of the things that we'll be inviting people to do when they work with us is to be able to review and revise everything that they've done that's led them to where they are today. I regularly say to clients, everything that you've done has led you to where you are today. And if today isn't where you want to be, or at least aligned with the trajectory of where you want to be in the future, if we're struggling right now, if we've hit some form of bottleneck, then it might be that everything that's led you to where you are today is now everything that's holding you to where you are today. And it might be that we have to shed some of the things that we've done previously in order to be able to move into what is to come, the next level of business. I frequently say to clients, new level, new devil. We've got to be willing to be able to review and revise some of the things that we're doing to establish is that still relevant and necessary in that bigger level of business. And therefore, learning when to quit is to be able to know when to shed, know when to let go and stop doing the things that you are currently doing that are holding you back from doing the things that you now should be doing in order to grow into a bigger business. And trust me, there are a series of different levels of financial revenue levels that we can look at as a monitor and as a guide for where you ought to be operating and the things that are really important to you right now. And one of the big challenges that I often see with new businesses that I start working with is that they're trying to do lots of this type of activity in this size of business. They've seen things online, or they've heard things, or they've witnessed it from other people within their network, and they believe that that's relevant to them also. And sometimes it's the right thing at the wrong time. And by trying to do too much, you end up actually stifling your ability to be able to move forward. So learning when to quit is to understand the things that are going to enable you to achieve what it is that you set out to achieve, but also along that journey to recognise that there are some things that we've previously done that we've now got to stop doing to free us up the time to start doing the new things that we need to be able to take on board. There's a great blog that I've written on our website a couple of years ago now, all about the power of saying no. The importance of being able to not just verbalise no to a prospect that's perhaps not a good fit, but also to be able to review and to say no internally, to say, when am I going to stop doing the things that are holding me back from taking this to the next level? How can I make the next big, bold step? Now, if that's something that you'd want some help and support with, like I say, there's the blog on the website that you'll see in the show notes on some examples of that and how to be able to move forward. But if you'd like to learn more about how we help people to be able to significantly and sustainably not just grow but scale the business, then the first step would be to be able to undertake your own free ADDAZERO audit. Simply visit www.addazero.co.uk/free scale audit. And within 5 or 6 minutes, you'll have your own bespoke and tailored report on the current strengths and vulnerabilities within your business, with some recommendations tailored to you and your business on what you might choose to do first in addressing those vulnerabilities. Again, all I can suggest to you today is you need to understand that everything that you've done has led you to where you are. And if where you are isn't on track with where you want to be, then perhaps it's time to be able to review what is the things that you are currently doing that you now need to stop doing to free up the time and the effort and the resource to start doing the next level of detail. how to take your business from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 figures is all about understanding when to quit and what else to take on board instead. God bless, take care. I'll see you again next week.
That's all for this episode. As always, we really thank you for listening and welcome your comments, thoughts, and suggestions. So please do drop us a line by emailing podcast@mytruenorth.biz. And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to this through. And tell your colleagues and business network all about who we are. You've been listening to the ADDAZERO podcast, presented by Jay Allen. Brought to you in association with My True North, the UK's leading ethical coaching company.